Number 10. Hobgoblins. You heard that right. What's worse than one hobgoblin? Well, how about two hobgoblins? In the recent Amazing Spider-Man series, Hobgoblin returns in issue number 11, but he isn't alone. Over the years, there have been multiple people to carry on the mantle of Hobgoblin, and in this case, there are two people that end up returning at the same time, making the villain even more deadly since there are not one of them active at the same time, but two. Ned Leeds, this time around, is once more brainwashed into joining up with Roderick Kingsley. But even still, together they both give Spider-Man a run for his money, causing Norman Osborn, who's actually currently good and sponsoring Spider-Man and giving Peter a job, to call in reinforcements. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love Spider-Man, be sure to show your love by clicking that subscribe button. Number 9. Queen Goblin. Queen Goblin. Oh my goodness, I love her design. So cool! Queen Goblin is basically evil Ashley Kafka if she was combined with Norman Osborn's sins, which initially, I'm not going to lie, I kinda thought that the Beyond Corporation combined her with a piece of the Carnage symbiote, but I digress. Dr. Ashley Kafka actually has a history with Ben, as we learn in his own miniseries, which made her transformation into Queen Goblin that much worse really. Although to be fair, this isn't actually the Ashley Kafka, but instead a clone version of her, as the original Dr. Kafka is dead. This clone was actually released by Norman Osborn, who came across her in an old lab belonging to the original Jackal, aka Miles Warren. As Queen Goblin, thanks to her combination with the sins of Norman, actually has powers similar to him while he's hopped up on the Goblin formula. I guess the Goblin formula is also a sin of his, so this seems to make good old weird comic book sense to me. Other than the usual Goblin stuff, Queen Goblin also has her Goblin gaze, which allows her to prey on the negative and often remorseful thoughts of her victims, attacking them psychically and often making them turn on themselves. I don't really know where this power comes from. It could be a product of Dr. Kafka's psychological know-how combined with like the Goblin formula, or something Maxine Danger sprinkled in. She did say, you know, it's basically like a designer villain she made herself, so who knows what that means. Number 8. Venom. Venom for the last decade and even before has been moving ever closer to full hero status. And yet, this year we saw him return to an earlier state in terms of his relationship with Spider-Man, and kind of in terms of his relationship with himself, but that's more about the Venom series. Venom was originally known as being an enemy of Spider-Man. This was actually because the symbiote found camaraderie in Eddie Brock after being rejected by Peter Parker itself when the symbiote came to Earth the first time. Well, at least the first time in terms of our comic history, but not really in terms of like the symbiote's retcon character history. Yeah. Eddie and the Venom symbiote actually bonded as a result of their shared hatred of Spider-Man, and thanks to an accidental trip to Limbo and some meddling from the Goblin Queen, Venom now has reverted to this characterization, with Eddie even referring to himself and Venom as we again in the comics. But the really weird part is that Eddie actually isn't even really bonded to Venom at this point in time, as he's the King in Black, in essence becoming one with all symbiotes. So super weird once he realizes he's kind of the only one in there. He's like, what? Number 7. Sinister Six Super Adaptoid. The Sinister Six Super Adaptoid was pretty cool to see as it graced the pages of Zeb Wells' run on Amazing Spider-Man last year. The issue it appeared in advertised a potential 7th member of the Sinister Six, with the cover reading, "The Sinister Seven?" The Sinister Six Super Adaptoid, as it turned out, was not a 7th member, but instead a combination of all 6 members of the Sinister Six in one neat AI package. However, for all the power it boasted, its weakness lay also in being an amalgam. Because what have we learned about the Sinister Six at this point? Well, we've learned that teamwork isn't exactly their strong suit. But I mean, if it was, Peter would be in some real trouble here. He probably wouldn't even still be alive. The Sinister Six Super Adaptoid was defeated by the combined efforts of Spider-Man and the Sinister Six working together, and ultimately ended up turning on itself and then tearing itself apart. Although it turned out there was actually someone else behind this machine who was even more of a threat to Spidey. Number 6. Hallows Eve. Who is Hallows Eve, you ask? Why, none other than one of my favorite, often untalked about characters from the comics, Janine Godby. One of her names. She's had a few names, but I'm just gonna call her Janine because I know that's what she prefers. Janine made her return to the Spider-Verse during the Beyond event. She was once Ben Reilly's girlfriend, but after turning herself in for killing her father, who had severely mistreated her, she ended up spending a long time in prison. The Beyond Corporation managed, however, to work out a deal with the state to allow Janine to be put in their custody, allowing her to be with Ben once more, but also forcing her to live basically under house arrest. I mean, it was a beautiful condo in New York City that I'm sure most of us would willingly allow ourselves to be imprisoned in, but at the end end of the day, a prison is still a prison no matter how nice it is. Janine and Ben would eventually discover the dark truth of what Beyond was really up to and turn on this organization, with Janine escaping their custody. During the Dark Web event, she is transformed by the Goblin Queen into Hallows Eve, using the magic of Limbo and the Demon Sim. As Hallows Eve, Janine can create masks to use that basically give her different kinds of powers depending on the mask that she's using. Number 5. Sinister Six. The Sinister Six recently fought against Spider-Man once again. This time around, the team included Dr. Octopus, Kraven, or well, Kraven's last son really, since Kraven is currently no more in the comics himself, Mysterio, Electro, Vulture, and Sandman. And the team was actually being held against their will by the Ultra Living Brain when Spider-Man faced them. In fact, he teamed up with them in this issue to face the Sinister Six Super Adaptoid powered by the Ultra Living Brain initially. But when he chose to show this new sentient AI being Mercy, the Sinister Six decided to turn on him. They beat him badly and were about to kill him, and if it wasn't for the intervention of the Ultra Living Brain themselves, the Sinister Six may have even succeeded. Fortunately, it was able to contain them and ship them off back to where it found each of them prior to their kidnapping. Although, honestly, Spider-Man would have rather the Ultra Living Brain packed them up and sent them off to jail, but. Number 4. Ultra Living Brain. The Ultra Living Brain was the creation that followed in the footsteps of the Living Brain, and the Living Brain is a really old foe that Spider-Man once faced years and years ago now in terms of comic book history, first appearing back in issue number 8 of The Amazing Spider-Man from the 60s. The Living Brain has appeared since then, but when it comes to Spider-Man villains, tends to reside among some of the most, well, forgotten, having appeared in less than 50 issues since its first appearance back in the 60s. The Ultra Living Brain is in essence its child. It was created by the son of the creator of the Living Brain, Dr. Petty. Dr. Petty's son, Randall Stephen Petty, had tried to make a new Living Brain in the past, and once again, compelled to continue his father's legacy, this time around built the Ultra Living Brain. The Ultra Living Brain eventually became powerful enough to kill its creator, albeit kind of accidentally. It impersonated Petty and used Stephen's resources to find the original Living Brain, becoming obsessed with continuing its legacy by answering the question, who is Spider-Man? Number 3. Chasm. Chasm is Spider-Man's current nemesis in the Dark Web event. I would argue his main nemesis. Chasm was once Spider-Man's clone, Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly made his return seemingly back to being a hero in the Beyond event. In this story, a mysterious corporation known as Beyond hired Ben to become their new Spider-Man after acquiring the copyright to the name. As Spider-Man, Ben became like a corporate superhero. Everything he had was paid for by the company, with them helping him, seemingly, to get to where he was needed most and in his fight against criminals and villains. In reality, however, Beyond was manipulating Ben, and while doing some good, was actually more focused on advancing their own nefarious plots and experiments, and kinda creating villains. That's also a thing they do. After having his memory severely damaged, Ben faced off against the original Spider-Man, Peter Parker. At the end of their fight, Ben's will to live was called into question, and he ended up sacrificing himself, allowing himself to seemingly drown in toxic green goo. In reality, he did not die, but was reborn again as the villain Chasm, who has returned with new weapon-oozed powers to get revenge on Peter for stealing his memories. Although Ben seems to be remembering that wrong, to be honest, but doesn't really matter because that's what Ben thinks happened, so. Yeah. Number 2. The Goblin Queen. The Goblin Queen is actually one of the most powerful foes that Spider-Man has had to face this year, and likely one of the most powerful foes he has had to face maybe ever. With the combined power of Jean Grey being her clone, and the dark demonic power and demon army of Limbo behind her, Madeline Pryor feels pretty unstoppable here. At least that's how it appears thus far during the Dark Web event. At the time of this recording, we're only a few issues into the Dark Web event, so keep that in mind. Although when this goes live, the event will be probably more than halfway through, I think. I'm still not completely convinced that this is really Maddie, considering what has been going on with her in the New Mutants series, where she truly seemed to be committed to turning over a new leaf. But hey, here we are. And if this is actually Maddie as it appears to be, Spider-Man is going to have his work cut out for him when it comes to defeating her alongside Chasm and Venom and Hallows Eve. Goodness! Number 1. The Beyond Corporation. The Beyond Corporation was probably one of the coolest new villainous organizations to rear its head in the Spider-Man comics. comics in 2022. And the super cool thing about it, it's not actually as new as you think. If you were just introduced to the Beyond Corporation via the Spider-Man Beyond event, you might be surprised to hear that it's actually been around since 2006 in the comics. Beyond has only made less than 40 appearances, but its first appearance actually happened not during the Beyond event in ASM and the Point Bays, but back in Next Wave. Beyond actually gets its name from the true all-powerful beings behind it, who are, you guessed it, Beyonders. So while Maxine Danger might send a shiver down your spine, I know she did mine, the real danger isn't even just in the corporation or those who manage it, but the cosmic threat behind it all. And while Beyond might be gone for now in the comics, I'm more than certain that the Beyond event isn't the last we will see of the Beyond Corporation. Even though they were defeated, they really created a lot of problems for both Peter Parker Spider-Man and Ben Reilly when he was recently Spider-Man. So I feel like we also have to take into consideration, although they didn't win, they caused a huge ruckus.
So we're all familiar with Trapster, right? Peter Petruski, the incredibly intelligent chemist who fights with pretty much a high-powered glue gun as well as other adhesives. Well, there's a mysterious woman taking on his moniker. Not much is known about this new Trapster, but she's actually the third person to take on this name. Cool thing about her is that she ditched the E in Trapster because who needs the E? It's 2022. It just looks cooler. This version of Trapster first appeared rudely interrupting a fight between Spider-Man and Vulture, and she robbed the winged villain of money he had just stolen. This may have seemed like a good thing, but she didn't give the money back. She's now a member of the all-female crime syndicate, the Sinister Syndicate, having been recruited by Beetle.
Number 9. Sin Eater. Sin Eater is Stanley Carter. While his costume may have remained somewhat the same, actually pretty much the same, his appearance more recently in the comics drastically changed after he was resurrected by Kindred, who were actually revealed to be the twins. The twins being Sarah and Gabriel Stacy, who in turn were revealed to be clones created from the genetic materials of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. So not their naturally born offspring. Yay. Then Sin Eater died, then was resurrected again. The second time Stanley was brought back after he'd taken his own life, he appeared in a zombie-like state, making him almost unrecognizable from his usual appearance, barring the fact that his costume has remained pretty much the same since his first appearance. Although after rising from the grave the second time, his costume is pretty tattered, so I really think some people might have been like, who dis?
So, as we stated before, there is a new channel we have out now called Most Amazing Top 10 Anime, so if you're into that sort of thing, give us a follow and subscribe. We're putting out videos every day. This next master of the hunt is the ruthless son of Sergei Kravenov, simply known as Kraven the Hunter, the last son of Kraven. Sergei Kravenov, the original Kraven, wanted to carry on his legacy, so instead of having more children, because that would just take too long, plus he already has a daughter, he decided to create a whole lot of clones of himself, 87 to be exact, and attempted to train them in the ways of the hunt. Well, this current Kraven got his title by murdering all his brothers, which, hey, if you want to prove you're the apex predator, killing 87 clones of Kraven the Hunter is a great way to start your career, isn't it? He also saved the skulls and brought them before his proud dad. The son made his dad even more proud when he strangled his father to death while he was disguised as Spider-Man, thereby breaking his curse of immortality. The son has now taken on his father's moniker, Kraven the Hunter, as well as his actual name. Good job, buddy.
Number 7. Kane Parker. Kane Parker was initially a clone of Spider-Man who, yes, was considered to be, kinda evil. Chiefly because Kane didn't have any qualms with killing people, leaving them with his mark of Kane, which typically was used to kinda burn the face of his victims. And also because he had long hair and was more moody than Spider-Man, which is a feat because Spider-Man's a pretty moody dude. In reality, the mark of Kane was actually just Kane using his spider climbing little hooks on his hand, as we saw showcased visually in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, to burn his victims' faces. Kane was also seen as evil because he was mentally unstable, having been a defective clone who was rapidly deteriorating, which basically affected his mind. However, Kane is now known as Scarlet Spider and has a completely different look and attitude when compared to his original appearance and presentation in the comics. While still being, somewhat edgy because he's still Kane, he's definitely still more of a hero now in the comics than he ever was before.
The original Super Adaptoid, created by Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, was originally a villain facing off against Captain America, Iron Man, and of course the Avengers. Also going up against the X-Men, it was able to mimic and visually copy anything it wanted, giving it a hero's abilities and powers. But in Amazing Spider-Man 900, however, Spidey faces off against a different version of this shape-shifting entity known as the Sinister Six Adaptoid. This version of the character sports a brand new look, most prominently featuring Doc Ock's tentacles, but there are other visual elements in the character's design as well. The Sinister Six Adaptoid is an amalgamation of sorts of, you guessed it, the Sinister Six, having the abilities of Doc Ock, Vulture, Kraven, Mysterio, Sandman, and Electro. The Sinister Six had been captured by the Living Brain, and their powers and sentience combined to form the villain. So if you thought these guys were strong on their own, imagine going up against all of them at once. Spider-Man actually needed help the real Sinister Six in order to take this abomination down. Go figure. Also, I love when villains team up with the hero just to because they both hate the same person. It's just fun.
Number 5. Electro. The main Electro we've known for years is Maxwell Dillon, but there is a new Electro on the scene. This new Electro is Francine Fry. She was once the accomplice and love interest of Max, who died as a result of her love for him, and her obsession with villains and kinda her lust for them. While Max's powers were less in his control, Francine threw caution to the wind and decided to kiss him. Their kiss would result in her being electrified to death. However, she'd later be revived by Ben Reilly, operating as villain the Jackal, as part of a plot to help control Electro into basically doing his bidding. Turns out the DNA Reilly used to resurrect Francine in clone form was actually a mix of Maxwell's and her own as a result of that kiss, allowing her to harness and absorb electricity, chiefly the power of the suit that a depowered Max had at the time been given. Kissing Max once more, Francine absorbed the suit's powers, accidentally killing him in the process and becoming the new Electro. Max has since been resurrected, so now even more confusing, we have 2 Electros technically running around.
Up next, we're taking a look at Richard Fisk, now known as the Rose. The son of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, Richard would boast about how rich and powerful his father was, thinking he was just a highly successful businessman. Now, even if that was the case, come on, don't go around boasting about your parents' accomplishments. Live your own life. Well, that's exactly what Richard decided to do. Upon discovering his father was actually the kingpin of crime, Richard faked his own death and took on the moniker of the Schemer, attempting to take down his father's empire. The two would eventually reconcile after Richard felt bad about putting his dad into a coma. Fair enough. But this brings us to Richard's next moniker, the Rose. He now sported a purple mask and kept a rose in his front pocket and worked under his father, but secretly wanted to dismantle the Kingpin's organization from within. After killing a policeman in a shootout, however, Rose just realized he was a bad dude and allied himself with his father again, but then changed his mind and wanted to take over Kingpin's organization again. Just kill your dad or don't, man. It's a decision we all have to make at some point in our lives.
Number 3. Grey Goblin. Gabriel Stacy has been known by a few different names throughout the years, and has also had his backstory somewhat altered. Initially, we knew Gabe Stacy as Grey Goblin, and later as American Son in Age of Heroes. Originally, he was introduced to us as the son of Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy, who basically had a secret love affair which resulted in the birth of 2 twin babies, Sarah and Gabriel. However, when Gabriel and Sarah were revealed to be the mysterious demonic villain returning from hell, known as Kindred, we learned that they were actually never really the natural born children of Norman and Gwen, thank goodness, but instead were clones that Harry Osborn had made, using their genetic material to get back at his father, tormenting him and making him think the 2 were really his children, when actually they weren't. It was all Harry's plot. Ha ha ha. Not only did Gabriel have a completely different look as Kindred, but he also got a completely different backstory that explained away all the weirdness of his and Sarah's original origins. Which, I mean, thank you for that, because wow, that was bad. It's not good. I don't want Norman to sleep with Gwen. I'm not here for that.
This next baseball player turned villain is known as Frederick Myers, aka Boomerang, and he's gone through several changes, having worked under criminal organizations like the Sinister Syndicate, as an assassin, going up against a number of heroes, and of course Spider-Man. So how did this boomerang wielding baddie change? Well, he ended up aiding Black Widow, Maria Hill, and the Champions in their fight against Hydra, and cut a deal to get a full pardon for all his past crimes. That's pretty sweet. He later became Peter Parker's roommate in an attempt to get closer to Spider-Man as he was attempting to find the pieces of the Lifetime tablet. Though Boomerang was lying about his true motives to Spidey, saying he was only after the tablet to keep it away from Kingpin, this was quite the opposite actually, he was working for Kingpin. Despite his deception, however, Frederick actually formed a close bond with the hero and would go on to sacrifice his own life to save him during a fight with the vampiric villain Morlun.
Number 1. Green Goblin. Norman Osborn is often known as the villain the Green Goblin, one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains, if not the most iconic rogue he happens to have in his gallery. Their rivalry is an old one, going all the way back to the first appearance of the character in the 1960s, where Osborn actually first appeared not in his civilian form, but simply as the villain Green Goblin. But lately, Norman has had a change of heart, if you can believe that. It most certainly won't last forever, or at least I'd be very surprised if it did, but currently in the comics, Norman is actually one of the good guys for a change. This is after he had all of his sins purified by the villain known as Sin Eater. Initially, Peter as Spider-Man had saved Norman from Sin Eater, but after being taunted about Gwen, couldn't help but toss Green Goblin to the villain to be devoured, which, I mean, fair enough. But instead of perishing, Norman survived the encounter, no longer driven by madness, guilt, or rage. Having been purified, he was seemingly given a new lease on life, and currently remains one of the few villains purified by Sin Eater to stay that way. At least, so far. Number 10. Electro. Electro, even in his first appearance in issue 9 of the original Amazing Spider-Man series, was beating Spider-Man. At least, initially. When Spider-Man first meets Electro, he doesn't know what to do, and Electro gets away a few times before Spider-Man manages to stop him. At one point, Spider-Man even reaches out to try and grab Electro. Not a great idea. While Electro is in his electric shock condition, his words, not mine, it turns out touching him is deadly. Spider-Man survives the great electric shock he is given, but is forced to modify his costume in order to take on Electro in the future. He adds on rubber slippers and gloves, and likely in the future would make modifications to his costume, adding in rubber insulation in case he came up against the villain again, which he would many times. Because yeah, that's only issue 9. It goes on for a lot longer than issue 9. Number 9. Mephisto. Mephisto might not win in the most obvious ways, but he definitely is always sneakily on the up and up when it comes to him versus heroes. Any heroes really, Spider-Man included. In the case of Mephisto versus Spider-Man, that sounded more legal than I intended, but I guess we are dealing with binding contracts. Mephisto ended up helping Peter to get what he needed, but at a price. He required in exchange Peter's marriage to MJ, which for comic book continuity meant undoing that rocky but ongoing union. Spider-Man got what he wanted, Aunt May was safe and his identity was a secret once more, but I don't think he really realized what he was giving up until he experienced it. MJ didn't even seem to recall their marriage, although lately it seems to be implied that she might have known more about their past than she's let on. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you love it when I talk about villains, I love talking about villains, then be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here. I'm not just saying that. They don't just pay me to say that, this is the truth. Number 8, Chameleon. In his first appearance, Chameleon left Spider-Man running away in tears, ruining the day he ever became Spider-Man. Chameleon may have been apprehended in the end of issue number 1 of Amazing Spider-Man, but somehow it still felt as though he came out on top. Dang it, because Chameleon, you know, he's a villain, so he shouldn't win. Although I am kind of rooting for him sometimes. During their conflict, Chameleon attempted to make it seem as though Spider-Man was up to no good, impersonating him while committing acts of thievery and fleeing from the police. Oh no! Even once Spider-Man managed to catch him, it still seemed as though Chameleon might get away. Fortunately, Spider-Man had his spider sense to let him know something was up. He managed to get away from Chameleon, but it was only because Chameleon's disguise had become damaged in the fray that the villain was caught at all. So Spider-Man didn't even really win that day. It was more just like Chameleon made a mistake. And it was like, dang it. Now it's revealed who I am because you can see the Spider-Man suit underneath and I was impersonating Spider-Man. How embarrassing. Number 7, Morlun. Not only has Morlun proven himself to be a formidable foe in various storylines, with him taking on all of the Spider-Verse twice in the Spider-Verse event and Spider-Geddon in the comics, in addition to taking out multiple Spider-Folks / Spider Totems along the way, but he also went toe-to-toe with Spider-Man in The Other. The worst thing / I guess best thing for Morlun fans about this story is how Morlun doesn't just ever go for the 1-2 knockout. Morlun seems to prefer drawing out his victory, teasing his victim if you will, and enjoying Spider-Man's suffering. It's probably because Morlun's used to winning so much. He's used to devouring Spider Totems, so he's like, we'll just let this play out. At one point, Morlun devours Spider-Man's eye in a fight and beats him to within an inch of his life. However, while this definitely feels like a victorious moment for Morlun and Spider-Man was beat here, he would eventually recover, meaning that Morlun didn't get a straight victory over Spider-Man. In fact, he'd even heal his eye back. But of course, villainous victories rarely ever get to be permanent, so I think we still need to count this one. Number 6, the Lizard. While Lizard doesn't do anything crazy like succeed in completely killing Spider-Man or anything like that, he does beat him in the race against time to save his friend, Dr. Kurt Connors, who, is also the Lizard. In the story Shed, the Lizard ends up taking over before Spider-Man can get there to try and stop it. Spider-Man arrives far too late, as the Lizard seems to have permanently gained dominance after devouring Kurt Connors' son against his own will. This victory would be one that would not only haunt Spider-Man, but the Doctor as well. He would end up finding a way to cure himself of his lizard brain, but become stuck in his lizard form, kept in a containment cell for his crimes, but unable to bring himself to reveal Spider-Man that he had finally cured himself mentally of his reptilian half. This whole thing is just a super big Lizard win in my mind, because even when Connors frees himself of the Lizard, he's still stuck in the lizard form, and he still is I feel too guilty to even be able to tell people what's really going on. So the Lizard really won, even though he was gone. Number 5, Mysterio. Mysterio recently got a pretty big win in the MCU, in typical Mysterio style, I must say. While he hasn't been doing too hot in the comics lately, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in Spider-Man Far From Home, Mysterio managed to earn Spider-Man's trust and even infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D., making them believe he was a hero from an alternate world. I'm not going to lie, even I personally wanted to believe it. It turned out this was not true, and while his backstory was a little different here, Mysterio here was still a master at illusion and a full-on villain. In the end, Quentin Beck would seemingly die during a confrontation with Spider-Man, but it turns out he had one more trick up his sleeve. And at the end of the film, we see a video recording of Beck that incriminates Spider-Man and also reveals his true identity as Peter Parker. He's going to be in a lot of trouble in the next movie, I think. Number 4, Kraven. Kraven's Last Hunt is a story that forever sticks out in comic book history. Especially in Spider-Man's history, it is a dark tale where Kraven finally captures his most prized prey, Spider-Man. What's more, it's also implied he kills Spidey. He then proceeds to take Spider-Man's place, proving once and for all that not only is he capable of capturing and killing the hero, but also aiming to prove that he's better than Spider-Man by beating down all his villains brutally. In the end, we learn that Spider-Man was not actually dead, but in a comatose, death-like state all this while. He returns, and Kraven acknowledges that while he seemingly won to do what Spider-Man does while keeping to his moral code is actually an impressive feat. Something that Kraven likely wouldn't actually be able to do. His final hunt complete, it's then implied that Kraven takes his own life. Number 3, Kingpin. There are a few times that Kingpin has beaten Spider-Man throughout the comics and alternate universes that we have explored. At one point, he actually manages to kill MJ in a what-if version of Back in Black, and while Spider-Man manages to hunt him down and even kills him, in the end, Kingpin's actions turn Spider-Man into a villain. So I'd still consider that a win for Kingpin. But what I'd really like to focus on here is the time that Kingpin managed to kill Spider-Man in Sony's groundbreaking animated film Into the Spider-Verse, one of my favorite films of all time. Here, Kingpin manages to actually kill Peter Parker, the current Spider-Man of Miles Morales' universe. Although Miles would also learn of alternate universes with their own Spider-Men, Spider-Girls, and even Spider-Pigs. He would also learn of his newfound powers and himself have to protect the city as a new Spider-Man. But still, when it came to the Peter Parker of his reality, Kingpin killed him. He dead. He dead. So dead. Never coming back. Number 2. Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock actually succeeds in taking Spider-Man's place, not just by impersonating him, but by actually swapping bodies with the hero. That the two swap bodies, wah 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 wah, with Peter ending up stuck in the dying form of Doc Ock, and Doc Ock's mind now within the young and superpowered body of Spider-Man. Oh my goodness. Eventually, he would relinquish this form, giving it back to Peter when he realized he was incapable of making the tough decisions required of a more heroic spirit. But for a time, we'd come to know this version of villain and hero combined as Superior Spider-Man. And if you're wondering, but wait a minute, didn't Peter die in Doc Ock's body? Yes, but also his consciousness lived still on in his mind. It's a little confusing, but if you read it, it makes sense. It's like comic book confusing, just if you are explaining it quickly to someone in a list. Number 1, Green Goblin. You can take Peter's body, you can take his mind, you can ruin his reputation, but one of the worst things you can ever do to him is to break his heart. There are many ghosts that haunt Peter Parker, but one of the most meaningful ones to this day remains that of Gwen Stacy. Gwen was Peter's childhood sweetheart. Before he and MJ were together and were a thing, he was with Gwen, who was also a science enthusiast and academic like Peter. Gwen ended up being taken hostage by the Green Goblin and thrown from a bridge. When Peter as Spider-Man went to save her with his web shooters, it's implied that his own attempt to do so was what killed her. The tension from his web caused her neck to snap. Norman Osborn has remained one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains to this day, and for many, the moment Green Goblin killed Gwen Stacy was where this shift really happened for his character, making him Spider-Man's greatest and most feared nemesis. Number 10, J. Jonah Jameson. While JJ might not seem like the craziest supervillain out there, he has his moments, truly. Sure, he's just a guy who most of the time causes Spider-Man more grief in his civilian identity of Peter Parker as his loudmouthed, often angry and demanding boss, but if he gets his hands on robots, whew, watch out. JJ isn't at the level of world domination underestimation, but for the most part, Spider-Man fans generally just think of JJ as a nuisance, a menace, if you will, to Peter's everyday life. However, JJ has not only threatened Peter's livelihood and Spider-Man's reputation, but has also even gone toe-to-toe with Spider-Man himself, and even at one point took on She-Hulk. Typically, he's at his most dangerous whenever he gets his hands on the Spider Slayer robots or armor, which he often uses to more directly hunt Spider-Man or other heroes down himself, using muscles, or robo-muscles I guess, as opposed to just the written word. And let's not forget that the written word and media itself are also way more powerful than we maybe give them credit for, both in the comics and in real life. Number 9, Sandman. The only thing that really holds Sandman back from being so deadly is his own disinterest in crime. In the end, Sandman often resents what he has become and even grows to resent being a criminal. There are even times in the comics when Sandman has tried to turn over a new leaf and go against his story as a villain, becoming reformed, preferring to stay neutral, lawful, and of course even at times teaming up and aiding heroes. This is really what holds him back though. That, and in some cases, the vacuum cleaner. Though really that shouldn't have been able to hold Sandman at all, considering that he can control the sand that makes him up, which means that, yeah, he can just kinda like move out of the vacuum cleaner, right? As sand particles. Sand is a powerful substance. It can cut you, it can get inside a wound, it's minuscule, it can get through and into almost any room or location, as it can pass through the smallest nooks and crannies. Sandman is also virtually immortal and can create duplicates of himself, allowing him to access a giant form by balling up all of these duplicates together. Now imagine if he did something like this, but on the scale of all of the sand in the world. Let's not forget that scientists have estimated that there are more grains of sand on planet Earth than stars within our universe. I know stars are bigger than grains of sand, but still, there's a lot of sand on this planet, like a lot of sand. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Spider-Man villains, let us know by clicking that like button. Number 8, Morbius. Another villain that is really only curbed, I think, because of his often more heroic nature and sense of humanity is Morbius. Okay, so Morbius might not be a global level threat like we were talking about in the intro, but he's definitely more powerful than you might think. A lot of people probably don't think about Morbius much at at all, I imagine. But like the Lizard, if he's completely feral and unreserved, he's pretty dangerous. Recently in the comics, we saw that Morbius is back to being a fearsome, uncontrolled, ruled by his hunger, pseudo-science vampire, when he comes up against Ben Reilly's Spider-Man during the Beyond Spider-Man event. Ben struggled to fight against Morbius, and if it wasn't for some help from Beyond, he may have even died as a result of their battle. In the end, it took the Daughters of the Dragon duo, Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, together to take down Morbius, and even then, they may have only been able to do so because Morbius at that point was missing an arm. Dr. Michael Morbius can be quite strong when his power is completely unleashed, and there's nothing holding him back. Number 7. Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson isn't a villain anymore in the comics, but he did start out as one. And from his humble beginnings, you likely would not have imagined that he'd become so powerful as a character. Flash Thompson started out as Peter Parker's schoolyard bully. He didn't have any powers, he was just kind of a jerk. Over time though, Flash became less of an oaf and eventually even became a friend to Peter. He then goes on to serve in the military, becoming a decorated hero, and even becomes a superhero after he becomes Agent Venom, teaming up with the Venom symbiote, who also has a villainous origin story. Sure, Agent Anti-Venom, aka Flash Thompson, probably won't be the guy threatening the entire world, because, well, he's a hero, but he definitely now possesses enough power to instead be a hero who could potentially save the world. And considering that he was just your average run-of-the-mill high school bully, you probably wouldn't have expected him to come so far. Number 6. Sauron. I've always felt bad for Sauron. Like, this dude does not get enough love when it comes to our boosting of supervillains here on the channel. I know Sauron seems kinda silly on paper, but he's also pretty diabolical and deadly when he wants to be. And if the person writing the character also believes in his prowess. Sauron can temporarily absorb mutant powers, is super strong, and somehow has functional pterodactyl hands that he can use to pick up weapons and items. I don't even know how he does that. That's nuts to me. Sauron is also an energy vampire, which means his powers are literally deadly. He needs life force energy to live, and when he absorbs life force energy, it can actually result in the death of his victim. Honestly, I think if he just had the right team up, he could be pretty unstoppable. Maybe with X-Men Green, he'll be able to do something crazy. I really want X-Men Green to be like a super villain team. Like kinda like Poison Ivy. Like, we're villains, but we're like saving the planet. Number 5. Sin Eater. Sin Eater saw a massive power upgrade recently. Initially, he was just a crazed man obsessed with absolving the sins of others through killing them. But more recently, in Nick Spencer's run on Spider-Man in 2020, he became so much more than that. In issue number 46, we see Sin Eater with newfound powers to actually absorb and absolve the sin of villains, and with those sins, he would also gain their powers. This meant that the sky was almost the limit for just how powerful of a villain Sin Eater could become. However, after learning that he was being manipulated by Kindred and kinda used as a pawn, Sin Eater became distraught and ended up taking his own life. He would later be resurrected as a corpse, but we don't really know what happened to said corpse after he was brought back and the fight against Kindred sort of came to a close. He could still be out there somewhere though, and who knows, he could have some of his former hyped up powers. I doubt it, but even if he doesn't, he did have it at one point, so I think we should count it. It was pretty cool. Number 4. Chameleon. Chameleon is definitely a hero who deserves more love and respect, or at least more disdain if you love to hate the greatest villains. He was the first villain that Spider-Man ever faced in his own series. A lot of people don't think of shapeshifters or masters of disguise first when it comes to power levels, but the reality is, someone who is really good at disguising themselves as other people can be one of the most deadly and unstoppable villains around. I mean, look at what Mystique managed to do recently in X-Men's Inferno series, or look at what Chameleon might seemingly be up to currently in Devil's Reign. Not only is Chameleon great at creating chaos and hurting others by disguising himself as them, but he also is pretty good at just hatching plans as well. Number 3. Kingpin. When it comes to Kingpin, we usually think of him as a threat confined to New York City. In fact, some people don't even think of Kingpin at all when it comes to Spider-Man. Over the years, Kingpin has become more synonymous with the superhero Daredevil, even though Kingpin's first appearance was actually in a Spider-Man comic, making his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 50 during the original 1963 series. Lately in the comics, Kingpin has been setting his sights on a much more grand prize than just causing grief for New York, its citizens, and its heroes. He is taking on all of the superheroes based in the US that oppose him as he aims to run for president, using Kilgrave, yes, the Purple Man's powers, to encourage everyone to vote for him. Or else. Superheroes who do not ally themselves with Kingpin in this endeavor will face his wrath during Marvel's Devil's Reign event. Number 2. Mysterio. Another villain that often gets dismissed when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery is Mysterio. Mysterio is a villain that is all smoke and mirrors, and illusions, which makes a lot of folks consider him to be not so real of a threat. Still, in the cinematic take on the character, we saw Mysterio almost completely fool the entire world, or well, even being defeated, he kind of still did that. His plan here was to convince everyone that he was a hero and win them over to his side, and even despite seemingly dying, he actually still managed to kind of succeed. In the Old Man Logan universe, Mysterio is also the one behind defeating pretty much all of the X-Men by tricking Wolverine into thinking all of his friends were really supervillains, thereby getting Wolverine to kill the entire X-Men team and the school. Yikes. In other words, just because you think something isn't real doesn't mean that you shouldn't still fear it and that it can't still hurt you. A great illusion can be more powerful than actual action in some cases. Number 1. Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus is a villain that might be well respected among Spider-Man fans, but on a greater scale, he's not likely someone you think of when you think of a global level supervillain threat. But while he might not share the status of comic book villains like Doctor Doom, it doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to instill that level of fear among the superhero community. Dr. Octopus might seem a bit silly with his haircut and his mechanical arms and his sometimes snazzy white suit and sunglasses, but let's not forget that he's actually a diabolical super genius whose brilliance combined with the sheer strength of his claws makes him a dangerous person to cross. Some might say he's just superior.
At number 10, we have Sandman. This is a classic Spider-Man villain, but he gets a spot on this list because his pure strength can sometimes be overlooked. I mean, he's known to be able to lift upwards of 85 tons on top of his other powers. He's capable of transformation, his classic sand manipulation, and arguably one of his most powerful traits, his intangibility. This describes his ability to change his density to allow attacks and objects to pass through his body on command. This makes it extremely hard for Spider-Man to land any attacks on him, and if a counterattack comes back with one of Sandman's rock-hard punches, Spidey's gonna be in real trouble. Sandman is a real threat and packs a massive punch, so on a list about power, it would have been a mistake to leave him out. At number 9, we've got Juggernaut. We all know that Juggernaut is normally an X-Men villain, but Spidey and this extremely powerful mutant do face off, most notably in the Amazing Spider-Man number 229 to 230. After Juggernaut breaks into Madame Web's home and rips her out of her life support chair, Spider-Man needs to get serious. But as the fight rages on, it's pretty clear that even Spider-Man is gonna have trouble managing the sheer might of this titanic villain. This is probably due to the fact that Juggernaut is demonically empowered by the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, and his armor is unmatched in its durability. In the 230th issue, Spider-Man even drives a huge gasoline truck right into Juggernaut's body, letting it explode into a huge fireball. But he just walks away from this. So the only way that Spidey is eventually able to take him out for good is by allowing Juggernaut to sink into a giant slab of wet cement, keeping him down, at least for now. At number 8, I'm putting Rhino. Known to be able to lift between 75 and 100 tons, this villain is one of the strongest, brute force-wise, that Spider-Man ever faces off against. He stays back on the list simply because he still deals mainly in brute force and lacks dexterity in his approach to fighting. But a brute he is, as the Rhino is the manifestation of super durability and strength. His powers actually come about originally through gamma radiation treatments that give him several hundred pounds of added muscle tissue and bone to his body. He's known to be able to resist high caliber bullets, extreme temperatures, and fall damage even without his suit equipped. Good thing Spidey's so agile, because if he lets too many of Rhino's hits land, it might be lights out for our friendly neighborhood Spider. At number 7 is Mysterio. So far on the list, we've been dealing mainly with powerful villains in the traditional meaning of the word, brute strength. But Mysterio is a huge powerhouse, and he should not be counted out of a list about powerful villains. His power comes from his ability to absolutely discombobulate and confuse his enemies, and in many instances he's doing this to Spider-Man. him being a villain native to the Spider-Verse. One of the more notable face-offs between these two comes in issue 198 of The Amazing Spider-Man when Spidey faces off against 12 clones of Mysterio, or I guess 11 clones and one real Mysterio. In this encounter, Spider-Man almost drowns at the hands of the villain, but narrowly escapes his fate just in time. And this isn't even the closest call he's had with his special effects artist turned mystical supervillain. At number 6 is Morlun. At his base level, this vampire-like villain isn't necessarily the strongest, but his potential for extreme power comes from his ability to absorb the life force of any and all living creatures. And this ability may be a source of limitless power if used in the right way. He's also able to travel between universes, often finding himself on different versions of Earth, sapping life forces here and there. During the Great Hunt storyline, he actually kills and steals the life of Earth 311 Spider-Man, as well as a monstrous Spider-Man and yet another actual Spider-Man in another world, which is a pretty good resume already for the standards of any Spider-Man villain. However, he still isn't able to take on the Earth 616 Peter Parker, but a universe-traversing vampire creature that saps power from other superpowered beings is not to be taken lightly. At number 5, we have Venom. Spawned by the elder god Null, Venom is a symbiote that latches onto a host and takes it over, giving them a dark and menacing appearance and extremely powerful set of abilities. I mean, seriously, if you check out Venom's power set, it's pages long. Even without a host, the symbiote can use its slimy biomass to grab onto things and attack using tentacle-like extensions of itself. But when it does latch onto a host, it's able to mix its own power with that of whoever it's taking over. So when Peter Parker is taken over, there's a different set of abilities in Venom's arsenal than when Eddie Brock is overtaken. But Brock's Venom is a pretty serious villain on his own, touting telepathy, superhuman stamina, and immunity to Spider-Man's Spidey senses. This last ability is hugely significant and gives Venom a huge boost of power, specifically when facing off against Spider-Man. I mean, Spidey with no Spidey senses, he relies on it pretty heavily during battle, so that's a big one. At number 4 is the Red Goblin. This Green Goblin Carnage hybrid poses a serious threat to Peter Parker on numerous occasions, and honestly, I don't blame Spider-Man for allowing so many close calls. The Red Goblin is what happens when Spider-Man uses nanites to take away Norman Osborn's ability to use the Green Goblin formula, because as he searches for his powers once again, Norman comes in contact with the Carnage symbiote and bonds with it. He then uses his ingenuity to remove Spider-Man's nanites and is able to use the Green Goblin formula once more. And a Green Goblin with the added powers of the Carnage symbiote is no joke. This hybrid villain is actually part of a major finale that caps off the Amazing Spider-Man comic series. So you can take a look for yourself at the sheer power of Red Goblin by reading the event Go Down Swinging, issues 797, which would be the Amazing Spider-Man issues 797 to 801. Shoot me a DM and let me know what you think. I didn't know much about Red Goblin before this list, so I'd love to hear some trivia. At number 3 is Firelord. Easing into the top 3 is when we start running into these cosmic bad guys that bring otherworldly levels of firepower to the table. This Herald of Galactus is no ordinary bad guy. In fact, he wields the Power Cosmic, a source of nearly limitless power, and he sure doesn't hold back when facing off against Spider-Man. Their fateful encounter takes place in the Amazing Spider-Man number 270 when Firelord makes his way to Earth but is immediately intercepted by Spider-Man. Luckily, Spidey is in his symbiote suit and gives this cosmic bad guy a run for his money. It's a pretty harrowing battle though, and gives us a reason to put Firelord right near the top of this list. At number 2, we have Carnage. This very powerful and very dangerous villain originates at Rikers Island Prison, where a serial killer named Cletus Cassidy is infected by the asexually produced offspring of Venom. And it's all because Venom comes back to save Eddie Brock at the prison and leaves the Carnage symbiote behind. If only they realized that a few metal bars weren't going to stop the symbiotes from finding their hosts, Spider-Man might never have had to deal with Carnage in the first place. Now, Cletus's Carnage is known to have a little less of a refined fighting ability than Eddie Brock and Patrick Mulligan, but he is significantly stronger. He's even known to surpass both Venom and Spider-Man's strengths combined, with a lifting capacity of 80 tons. And remember, there's a crazed serial killer behind the guise of this unstable symbiote. Cletus Cassidy was already a dangerous and determined sociopathic killer far before Carnage ever came into the picture. Alright, at number 1, we have the one and only, you probably already guessed it, Thanos. During the Battle of Titan, Thanos is confronted by Iron Man, Doctor Strange, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Spidey. And I think we all know what happens next. It's not the greatest outcome for the heroes, including Spider-Man, and this is pretty easily argued as being one of Spider-Man's most perilous matchups of his whole life. And sure, some of it is circumstance, and Thanos does have the Infinity Stones, but most of why this is such a game-changing battle is because of Thanos' sheer power on his own. He's by far the most powerful Eternal that comes from Titan, and is categorized as a Category 1 life ender by the Nova Corps. He's not just a threat to Spider-Man, but to the whole cosmos. And if not for this one fateful encounter with Spider-Man, he wouldn't have even made his way onto this list, because otherwise, Spider-Man would have no reason fighting such a powerful villain. Thanos is just out of Spider-Man's leagues in terms of power, and that's not a diss to my favorite superhero, it's just the sad truth of the matter.
Number 10, Big Wheel. Hey, wanna be a villain? Great. Just hire another guy to make you a big wheel with machine guns and rocket launchers on it so that you can ride around in it. It's that easy. That's what Jackson Wheel did. Can you guess what he called himself? When he first appeared, Big Wheel used his big wheel to chase and try to kill Rocket Racer while he was mid-fight with Spider-Man. Big Wheel wasn't even facing Spider-Man one-on-one. Just before he was about to get crushed, Spider-Man pulled Racer out of the way, and Big Wheel drove right off the side of a building and right into the Hudson River, ending both Jackson Wheel and his big wheel. All of this because Rocket Racer had some blackmail. Number 9. Crime Master. Why are there so many people who have no powers of any kind on Spider-Man's enemy list? This guy just walks around with a gun. That's it. He's another one of the many crime bosses in Marvel's New York, and I guess in that respect he chose a very fitting name. He is a criminal, and he has sorta mastered it. Usually, he employs others to do his dirty work for him, although he did partner with the Green Goblin for a short while before being shot and killed. He has come back from death multiple times under multiple different identities, which kinda made it hard for fans to follow who he is, even if they cared in the first place. Number 8, the Living Brain. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't a brain just kinda living by default? Like, if it's an alive human being, isn't it technically a living brain? This guy isn't living or a brain, I'm so confused! Okay, I'm gonna cut Marvel some slack here because the Living Brain is actually older than almost all of the main Marvel villains. He came before even the Green Goblin. He was created as a machine that could solve any problem, but malfunctioned after two guys got in a little scuffle and it went on a rampage until it was stopped by Spider-Man. It's been used by other smaller criminals, but was always stopped by Spider-Man. But hey, it eventually found steady work as a lab assistant and even saved the Spid on a few occasions. So there's that at least. Number 7, Big Man. I ain't got the facilities for that, big man. You really didn't. Frederick Foswell was a reporter at the Daily Bugle, and well, he was a little guy. Except when he wasn't. You see, Foswell was a master of disguise, and he used a costume that gave him a nice little hype boost in order for him to become aptly named Big Man. From this stature, he can now ride the adult roller coasters, reach the top shelf, and be the head of the crime gang, the Enforcers. Spider-Man works with the guy though, so unsurprisingly he was caught and incarcerated for a time. But Jonah gave him his job back afterwards, which is nice. He ended up dying in front of a bullet to save Jonah, so at least he wasn't all bad. Number 6, Black Fox. This one is a little sad. See, Black Fox is basically just a jewel thief who has had a very long career, seeing how he is now an old man. Just a regular jewel thief? Oh, why is this a problem for Spider-Man? It's not. It's really not. But you see, the problem for Spider-Man is that being an old man, Black Fox heavily reminds Peter of his Uncle Ben, which meant that Peter couldn't help but have a soft spot for the guy. He would let Black Fox go multiple times. I mean, I get it. I respect it. But Peter realized his weakness and stopped easing up on the old guy, finally throwing him in the slammer. While he isn't exactly threatening to anyone, he is the mentor of Black Cat, which does give him some notoriety. Number 5, Mirage. What's the best way to stop a robber? I know. Drop a chandelier on him. Wow, yeah, I guess that works. Mirage is a robber, but not just any robber. Oh, no. He and his gang had a specialty for robbing weddings. Honestly, who's expecting that? I mean, I wouldn't be. I'd be so surprised, I just give him my money, you know? He made a bad choice though, when he decided to rob the wedding of Ned Leeds and Betty Brant, where none other than Peter Parker was in attendance. Peter used his web shooters to turn off all the lights and don his spider suit. The day was saved when Spider-Man dropped the whole chandelier on Mirage, defeating him. Ouch. Number 4, The Spot. Could you imagine that the first time you reveal yourself to a hero, they just drop on the floor laughing at you? And on top of that, it's in front of Kingpin, one of the biggest crime lords in Marvel. It would be super embarrassing, except when you totally win and make them look dumb. Way to go, man. The Spot, yes, that's his name, had the power to create interdimensional portals, big and small, which he used to defeat Spider-Man and Black Cat the first time they encountered him. But only the first time. See, the Spot can only create as many portals as he has spots on his body, throwing them wherever he wants until he runs out, which he did in this second encounter with Spidey. And then he lost. Pretty badly. He's appeared here and there since, but he never really posed a threat to anyone, like anyone at all. Oh, but he did create the failed group, the Spider-Man Revengeance Squad, with other minor characters that lasted like 2 seconds. Hold up, I gotta stop you right there. Just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you, and I hope you appreciate us too. If you do, why not give us a little like and a follow? It really helps us to help you spend your free time watching top 10 videos. But hey, no judgment, we all do it. Number 3, slide. A chemical engineer turned super thief decked out in a super slippery suit. All right, let's get it over with. Jalome Bleacher created a chemical coating that basically eliminated the friction between an object and any surface it came into contact with, which, not even joking here, that could be really, really useful. Like, good job, man. Too bad the company he worked for closed their R&D department and Jalome had to find a way to independently fund his project. Honestly, I would have just found another company who wanted to fund me, but then I wouldn't appear on a list of people you never heard of, and that is a goal of mine. He created a suit with the chemical and used his slippery abilities to rob banks and try to destroy his old boss's business. His only other notable mentions were his midlife crisis and his death in a side story of the Civil War event where he was shot in the back for refusing to side with crime boss Hammerhead. I guess you could say that they had some friction. Okay, I'm just gonna slide my way to the door. Number 2, Stiltman. So long as I'm the master of my stilts, I'm unbeatable. I'm completely invincible. Wilbur, just stop. Just stop, man. Despite being an adversary to both Daredevil and Spider-Man, Stiltman just couldn't seem to be taken seriously. I can't possibly imagine why. Oh wait, no, I can. It's the stilts. Yeah, it's the stilts. What's interesting is that if you go into his Marvel wiki page, Stiltman actually has quite a long history, being involved in many storylines. And his stilts are actually pretty strong. At one point, the strength of them was able to plunge She-Hulk so far into the ground, she ended up in the subway. But then she beat him in a really embarrassing way. I mean, just look. His stilts could reach up to 290 feet though, which is actually kind of cool, I think. Number 1, Hypno Hustler. Okay, just look at this dazzling man. What an icon. The Hypno Hustler made his debut in the 80s, which I hope isn't a surprise to anyone. He uses a hypnotic guitar to hypnotize people, wears headphones that stop him from hypnotizing himself, and has boots that emit knockout gas and have retractable knives. What a combo! His story involves him performing at the nightclub Beyond Forever, where Peter Parker and pals just happen to be. Him and his band use their hypnotic grooves to hypnotize the crowd into giving up their goods. Peter Parker, being the hero, obviously knows what's going on and changes into his Spidey suit. During the fight, he realizes the headphones are the only thing keeping Hypno Hustler from hypnotizing himself, and Spider-Man removes them. That's it. Fight over.